it's, some people it's cut out to work with family.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our afternoon podcast with Ian Murray and Carey Duffy from Cooke. How are you guys doing today?
Good, very well.
Very good, Jake.
Yeah. Welcome everyone. Last week I forgot to press record on my recorder, and also I have my laptop on my lap. So with each week we get better. This is more professional than last week, which is again more professional than the week before. This is the third week. Then it's basically me talking to industry experts, and this week I've got Carey from Cooke Lenses, Cooke Optics, which is a legendary glass lens manufacturer that you're probably all familiar with. If you're not, then you're in for a real treat because, as I say, legendary is a key word here. They've been around since sort of day one of cinema. I think, Carey, welcome. Thank you for coming, for joining us. Should we start?
Thank you for having me.
Should we start off with the Jake? Should we line up that the Cooke kind of show reel and play that first, so people can get an idea? People that are not familiar with Cooke can get an idea of the kind of work that you're with.
I'll just explain. When I do a presentation, because I go out for the company and do presentations to film schools, universities, and the like. This is the way I normally start. It just sort of puts everybody in the mood, know what they're going to deal with. And also, because we're interactive here, Ian, and I know we have our agenda, what you want to talk about and discuss, but this film sometimes puts a couple of ideas and questions into people's minds, or what we're going to talk about will things that may have been covered in this reel as well. So it's useful like that.
Great. Should we watch it?
I'll play it out now.
Yep. got the job, and
We're back in, by the way.
Say again, sorry, Jake.
We're back in now.
So
okay.
Like the stall, with the whole audio stall as well. Do we need to repeat what we're saying? Or,
yeah, well, I played the video. Sorry, I didn't realize you were talking over the top of it because there's audio in the video. So I played out the audio in the video.
Ah, okay. Right, we've audio our end, so we weren't sure about that. So we were just wrapping. So yeah, should we start that again then, Carey? So yeah, obviously you see that Cooke have made some of the most legendary films ever shot, and Carey has just explained to me how he got approached by Cooke and how he started working for them.
Yeah, so I'd been working and consulting for a company called Tiffin Filters, who obviously make camera filters, probably the biggest manufacturer of motion picture camera filters globally. And I was walking home one day and I got a call and I thought, yeah, I like that. I like the sound of that. And that's really was it. Many, many years previously, I had been a Cooke owner. So, the Cooke is a very special company. The brand is a very special brand. As you said, Ian, in the introduction, we've been going, well, the Cooke brand has been alive since 1893. So, the brand has been going for 3 centuries in effect.
And the brand started off. Did it start off making stills lenses or motion picture lenses, or how did it?
Yeah, well, actually, it originated in the 1860s in York of Cooke and Son. They were telescope manufacturers, and in early, I don't know if it's actually 1893. I think that's the patent of Dennis Taylor's design of the Cooke triplet. Which is, if you look at it, really, when you look at lens design, there are only 6 basic lens designs which all lenses are built from, be they stills or motion picture lenses. So Dennis Taylor, who worked for Cooke, designed this photographic lens, which the telescopic Cooke and Sons had no use for. So they sold it to their friends, Taylor Hobson of Leicester, no relationship to Dennis Taylor, who designed the Cooke triplet, and said, look, they said, okay, we're getting into this new sort of photographic business. We'd love to, we'll take that lens off you. And one of the caveats in the deal was that any lens sold with that design had to carry the name Cooke. And so that's where Cooke lenses come from. They've actually originated as a telescopic manufacturer, sold to Taylor Hobson of Leicester from a design by Dennis Taylor for the Cooke triplet. And actually, Jake, if you go to, I think, the third image on the images I sent you, is it top to bottom? Yeah, that one. There we go. Those are basically the 6 main lens designs, which, as you can see from their dates, optics for stills and for motion actually happened 2 centuries ago.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I've heard about only being 6 lens designs. That's really interesting.
All lenses can be, including zooms, can be a combination of those lens designs, and for different reasons, different lens designs are incorporated into newer lenses. So there'll be an amalgamation of lenses, but those are the basic principal lenses.
Jake,
yeah. Yeah, what's up? Hello? Is Ian gone?
He was there.
Looks like he's dropped out.
Yeah, he looks like he's dropped out. I don't know if he wanted you to put back up the.
Put back up the. Do you want me to play something out in the meantime?
No, we were just going to put up the lens picture. Fixed design.
Are you back, Ian?
Yeah, I'm back now. Yeah, just got back. So yeah. I heard the 6 lens designs, and I saw the picture, and then we went. So every lens now made is a kind of variation on one of those 6 designs. Is that what you're saying, Carey?
You can find origins of those lenses with. I mean, we're not talking about iPhones, and we're not talking about the Hubble Hubble telescope lens, and we're talking about that type of lens design. We're talking about the basic principles of photographic and motion picture lenses use combinations of those physical principles of those lens designs.
And is it do the lens manufacturers patent a certain design, like you mentioned earlier that Taylor Hobson had that?
I mean, the Cooke triplet was copywritten in 1893, so I think it's run out of copyright now. And also, you'll notice that all of those lenses, all of the optical elements, are not aspherics. So aspherics brought a different ability for the elements to focus, shall we say. And basically, those are all spherical. So basically, the curvature of the glass is even. Or it's going to have a flat side, or it can have two curved sides. There's no different pitch in the glass. An aspheric is where you could have a pitch and then it goes up and comes down. So the polish isn't even, shall we say? It's not spherically polished over. So they allowed designers to design different types of lenses. They could be, I mean, I'm not a lens designer, but part of it could be that you'd aspheric polish because that one piece of glass could do the of three pieces of glass. That's just for ray tracing of light. But basically, six lenses are the design of all lenses.
So the aspheric, that's a polishing treatment that changes the actual physics of the lens.
Well, an aspheric can change the physics of the lens or the ray trace, but spherical round lenses are polished so that it's an even curve going over, in all directions. So it's a nice dome. The pitch of that dome can vary, but it is constantly even. Yeah. And obviously, one side may be flat, be concave or convex. It can be a polish inside the glass. But an aspheric is when that surface is not even across the surface. There is a fluctuation in it. Yeah.
And the Cooke still have the same, because I heard somewhere that Cooke still use the same polishers as they did many years ago. Is that the case?
We have polishing machines, or some of the polishing machines that still have on their original cast iron bed, they say on them patent 1910.
Right. Okay. And would they be used for, because you are reintroducing the Pancros, aren't you? Would they be used still for the Speed Pancro?
Spherical glasses, depending on the nature of the glass, is polished in certain ways. So we do have modern CNC machines for polishing glass more quickly, and the older not analog, that's the wrong word, but the older machines can work more slowly, and they can polish glass that may be more temperate, less temperate resistance to heat build up in polishing.
Right. Okay. So I think this leads us on quite nicely to the Cooke look. You mentioned the Cooke look earlier, and a lot of our listeners won't necessarily know what that means. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is and why Cooke stands out completely from the other lens manufacturers in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, when Cooke lenses became... Sorry, was that you, Jake?
No.
Okay. Okay, no worries. When Cooke lenses became very prevalent, I mean, when you say being around forever, yes, obviously there are some other optics manufacturers that started before us with photographic lenses, but in the motion picture business, there's some paperwork in the documentation of companies like I think famous Lasky's Players, which actually then became owned by Metro Goldwyn Mayer, that there was a trades restriction court case in the early noughties, shall we say, of the 1900s, where that they were also the leading theatre owners, and they restricted trade by being the only distributors of film. Well, 90% or 80% all of their projectors had Cooke lenses on them, and that's just not the cameras as well. So we did projection lenses at that period, and so we had a very thriving business with in the silent days in the US. In fact, you will know this, Ian, because I'm sure you're a user of Dado lights. Am I right?
Yeah, that's true.
So if you go and sit in Dado Weigart's office or in one of the boardrooms, I was there earlier this year, last year I think it was now, and I turned around and I went, Dado, who are those Cooke Speed Panchros? And he said, oh, they're Charlie Chaplin's. And I went, really? I said, what's the provenance? And he went, oh, his sister gave them to me. I went, okay, fair enough. Hands up. So when you see clips of Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, silent movies of the 20s, they were using Cooke Speed Panchros, the Series 1, back in those days. And, we have provenance from that. So what that meant is the reason that the Speed Panchros became so used by Hollywood was their speed, because they were an f2 lens.
Were they the first set of high-speed lenses then used in Hollywood?
No, I mean, there was a series before, a 3A, that was a photo lens that then got moved into used over to cinema, and then there was the Kinect lens that came before. In fact, if you go back, Jake, if you can, go back to the first JPEG or PNG that I sent you, there's a sort of little historical line of that's it, there we go. If we go there now, what I'm just going to do, because I'm not always go back again, go back to where you were, not to that one, because that's it. If you just leave it there, so if I just go back into here now, some reason I can't get my screen back up. Okay, so is there something about that? Maybe it's down here where all my notes are. Can't even see myself now. Okay, maybe it's down. Oh, hold on. I'll get to it down here in a minute for you, Ian, because it's in my. Come back here. Here we go. It's in my notes down here. So if I go in here. So that first picture that you see there is a Series 2 portrait lens. So that's from the stills from 1897. Yeah. And if you go through to the second image, that's a rapid view. That was a lens of choice by, do you know, an impressionist photographer called Alfred Stieglitzer?
No, I don't. I'm not familiar with his work.
Okay, well, you see his work. He was hanging around with, impressionist painters in Paris, and was introducing that style of cinematography into New York in the early hundreds. A very important photographer of that period. Then you get to, I'm just going through all my notes here, where we're going to the cinema lens. Yeah, that fourth image is actually a Series 2A cine lens, 1912, 1914, which included the Cooke triplet in its design. And if we go right to the end of the top line, that's when you actually get to the Horace W. Lee's design of the Cooke Speed Panchro, which was an f2. I'm just trying to get to here. So, yeah, that's around 1921, I think, or something. So there's a progression. You can actually see in the design of the progression of those lenses, and the second to last one having that sort of arm on it for putting focus.
So then the first Speed Panchro was about the 1920s, you say?
Yeah.
The design, that's the first, and the design has changed.
There were a few series of Panchros over the years, because obviously, like anything you design, the quality gets a bit better, and you learn new techniques. New glasses became available. So over the period, we finished manufacturing them in about 1965, the original Speed Panchro Series 3. So, yeah. They went for a good 45 years of building them, and the speed and the sharpness at that speed, which what made them the lens of choice, really.
So people could shoot at 2.1 with them, could they? And get
well, they were using an f-stops in those days. They didn't have transmission stops,
right
necessarily.
Right, but they were shooting wide open, pretty much.
Yeah, well, they could shoot too wide open because obviously, you know why Hollywood's in Hollywood?
Well, the weather, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. It was the weather for open air studios. Yeah, so for daylight studios, as to say. So they'd have to use faster lenses then. But then when they went inside and sound came along as well, and then, lights made a lot of noise, and, you had to box the cameras and stuff. So they needed a sort of fast lens, and they ticked the box at the time. So I've got a little point here. Yeah. For example, hold on, where am I? As I was saying earlier, the US Federal Trade Commission investigated the company for restraint of trade. That was famous Lasky's, actually turned into Paramount at the end of the day, because it was the largest theatre owner in the world, and it controlled the showing of pictures throughout its ownership of Paramount Pictures Distribution Corporation. And they were producing films by Mary Pickford from like 1913 to 1919. So no one knows who Mary Pickford was. She was the pin-up girl of the day. So they get bums on seats, I presume, back then. Yeah,
interesting. And then when did Technicolor come along then? And because you were saying earlier to me that
Technicolor was a 1930s process, and the thing with Technicolor is that I'm just looking for those notes there because they're all on different parts of different presentations. The Technicolor process, because it had a prism splitter for the three colors, was not a very easy process to produce the three color strips, and the only lens manufacturer who came up with the lenses that could produce the definition and sharpness that was required was Cooke, but it was marketed as Technicolor. So, and only people, only Technicolor or the studios that owned Technicolor knew they were Cooke lenses. So yeah, that process is another look that came through Cooke lenses. It's not the Cooke look necessarily that most people know about, but it is part of the arsenal of Cooke looks.
So going back to the Cooke look,
yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is, how you would describe that?
Yeah, so that look that was designed, that was then picked up in cinematography, is to say, and it's a guiding principle of Cooke lens design, and why it's so enjoyed by cinematographers, I would say. That's maybe a choice word to use, is that we design our lenses to give a dimensionality and a roll-off and a natural feel from what the eye sees of something in motion. A still photograph is, or can be viewed, and is viewed completely differently than motion, because you can look into corners of a still photograph, you stand and look at a still image, and certain lens designers or certain lens companies prefer that when you're looking at that, you get a perfectly sharp image corner to corner. Now, there's nothing wrong with that philosophy. It works for them. But for motion, if you think about it, we're trying to replicate what the human eye sees, but we're doing it in a 2D plane, which is quite difficult. Now, what we do with that, and if you think about it, is I'm looking at you in this camera, or you're looking at me on a computer screen or a telly or whatever, or you're looking at the world. You'll know that you have a sort of sharp area of vision that you generally concentrate on. I may be flitting about, but you're keeping it all pretty sharp. I know my hands, maybe you can't see them. They're out here somewhere now, but they're not sharp, but I know they're there. So there's a sort of dimensionality in what we view, that it's down the middle. We have eyes at the front of our head. We're looking at human faces. We're not geckos or horses with eyes at the side of our head. And we want separation between what I focus on here and what's behind, or when I come back into focus, when I pull my own focus in my eyes. So having that roll off, having that feel that I know it's there, but it falls away, and having the concentration in the center rather than making sure you're sharp down here to sharp up there, which if I'm going to look at it, I'm going to be doing that, and I'm not going to be looking properly. Or when you project that onto a motion picture, in a movie house and a screen, you're not looking over in the top screen. You may wander the picture a bit, but generally you're focused through the middle. That's part of the principle of where we focus the higher resolution part of our image. And some people think, because of also we have a little slightly rolling off of contrast, we have a warming of skin tones, they look at that image and they go, but it's not as sharp as so-and-so or so-and-so's, which is actually totally untrue. Because we don't check lenses on cameras. Cameras are not the way for us to check a lens. All of our lenses are checked on projectors by shining light through them and seeing what resolution they produce on a projected chart, because that's the light going through. And when you take our lenses and you project them, you find out we got exactly the same resolution pair lines with the other manufacturers through the center. We're not so interested in corner sharpness. So those are some of the sort of philosophical and design principles that are put into the lens to give the Cooke look.
Well, that's the brilliant explanation, Carey. Thank you so much for that. I mean, I've been fascinated with Cooke lenses from when I started my career back at the late 90s, and I actually first started embarking on doing beauty photography, beauty commercials fundamentally, and I actually inherited the kind of some of the techniques of a DOP at the time called Carl Oscarson, who was using Cooke lenses wide open at T2, the S4s that is, and Kino Flow lights to kind of create this dimensionality, very soft pallid kind of warm skin tones, very, very attractive kind of endearing kind of imagery. And I kind of nicked a few ideas off him, basically. And that's when I first got introduced to Cooke lenses. And the thing that fascinated me recently, actually, because I was doing some lens tests and I was actually searching, and guys, anyone listening now, I urge you to go and look up the Shane Herbert lens test, and because he basically puts them through their paces, and you can really see the difference in that dimensionality you're talking about. And one of the kind of goals for me in cinematography is, like you say, everyone's looking at a two-dimensional screen. It's to try and create the illusion of three dimensions, and I think Cooke really kind of does that better than any other lens manufacturer, because that somehow the center magnifies more than the surrounding. I don't know how you quite do it, but it has that, like you said, that kind of tunnel kind of expanded feeling, and that works so well. Like you say, it works so well for cinema. So it's great to hear that explanation. The psychology behind it.
It's not. Yeah, but it's not exactly. You see it, but it feels natural, because that's naturally what our brain does with our eyes.
Right.
So that's the organicness. We're not trying to design something that you don't naturally see.
Yeah. So you could argue in a way that this kind of this quest for perfection with lens design with most manufacturers is all about this sort of flat field and having everything from edge to edge sharpness. And your argument is basically that's kind of not how we perceive the world anyway. So it might be mathematically correct, but it doesn't end up producing images that feel maybe as alive and as real as a lens that's designed like a Cooke lens.
Yes, I mean, that is part of that philosophy. I mean, I know, go back to my previous life when I was selling camera filters, that one of the hardest sells to cinematographers or DPs using Cooke lenses were generally to try and make them buy more than a few diffusion filters. And I always used to get a great line back to me from some of them. I do that with lighting, and it's like, well, of course you do. You're using a Cooke lens. You could sell them an 85 for, tungsten to daylight, and an ND and a polarizer and a grad and all of these other things that you technically need to control light. But that Cooke lenses just have that organic look. And I'm not saying it's right for every job. You may need a lens for a different reason for a different job. But you generally tend to find, I find with a lot of cinematographers, you give them a Cooke lens. You said you've only got a Cooke lens to shoot with. You won't get, oh, God. If you give them some other, they'll go, okay, how am I going to make this lens work for my job?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not sure, Jake, are we still live? Because we've frozen on the Commons Room screen. Are you there, Jake?
Yeah, I'm still here, and we are still live as well. It's just, I think my stream end has just stopped. Give me 2 seconds.
Oh, okay, cool.
I mean, and go for taking that one even further, Jake. There were, like I said, back in the 50s when the studios ran everything. There were actresses who had in contracts that they would only be shot with Cooke lenses.
Yeah, I can totally believe that, because like my journey I was explaining earlier is definitely they're very suited for flattering skin tones. And one of the things that kind of journey, as you were saying, as DOPs not wanting to necessarily use diffusion. Try and get that look in the lens, and then do the rest, do the majority of lighting, and then get the right lens that works for your lighting. I think that's an approach that's becoming more popular now, and I think that is the right approach. My journey certainly has been from kind of experimenting with loads of filters early on in my career to kind of phasing them out, sticking with the ones that I still like, that I feel give me some kind of benefit, but maybe phasing the equipment out that kind of gets in between the subject, emotion of the subject and the viewer, and simplifying it down to really fundamentally correct lens choice and lighting. And I find that the more I work, the more I try and do things in the lighting. And as you know, I've bought my own set of Cooke lenses, and it's actually informed my lighting, because it's become like a more three-dimensional. And the other thing I do for the lenses I'm using, I actually bought some Cooke minis, because I actually quite like shooting 2.8 now, because there's this whole movement towards very, very narrow depth of field to kind of like direct the viewer's eye. But if you look at early cinema, they were going the opposite direction. They wanted deep focus, and they were doing the direction of the viewer's eye with cinematography, with lighting, with framing, and they were doing it in a kind of more sophisticated way, I feel. So I quite like. I think as I've mentioned to you before, I think the Cooke Mini is the best value lens on the market, because it's pretty much that.
We just lost you 2 seconds in. We just lost you. All right, can you hear us?
Back. Yeah,
okay, definitely.
So I was in the middle of a rant. Then did you? Where did you get with that, Jake?
No, I
couldn't. Minis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The density of a stop, or the size of a stop, to then light something to give it dimensionality. Of course, we have roll off. That's natural, but we don't have roll off where it's like this much roll off. And if you work with a stop that you give a focus pull or a choice, your movement and how you block things and how you pull focus to things and how things move in, then just naturally becomes more organic, I think.
Yeah. I think you're right. That kind of snapping into sharp focus and snapping out of sharp focus is something that obviously all the lens manufacturers, they drive towards that kind of high resolution. But as you say, it's suited for maybe certain things. So kind of, maybe sci-fi or things that have to kind of have a very kind of hard edge to them. But generally, I find, I remember Gordon Willis. We spoke earlier about Gordon Willis in prep for this. And I remember he used to say that he's not a romantic person in real life, but his photography has a romantic quality to it. And even with films like The Godfather, and he obviously was known as the Prince of Darkness and did a lot of kind of thriller noir style photography, but it always had a kind of cinematic romance to it, and a lushness to it. I kind of really can relate to that, and I think that the Cooke really helps with that process of getting that kind of lushness across. I listen to a lot of music, and I quite like listening to analog over digital, and I like valves, and valves have a certain kind of sound to them that they have a certain kind of lushness. And I kind of equate that to, for me, to Cooke lenses. They have a similar kind of lushness, a kind of like richness of quality that that's hard to find in modern computer design lens manufacturer.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to tune in. You have to be able to tune into it or make yourself accessible to that. But you also make an interesting point, because when you said earlier it was lighting and then the lens, at the end of it, I mean, obviously today people are very tuned into their digital cameras and what camera they like. But when it was film, it wasn't, well, it was the camera maybe that you liked, but the film stock was the most important thing, because that was your choice of, and it was locked in. It was very locked in, unless you were to do a bleach bypass or cross processing. But that capture, so those tool sets of knowing my lighting, how I light, what my lens tool is, and what my stuck capture is, maybe daylight, or then we go faster stock if we're at night time. They sort of concentrated people that they could get on with their job. And digital is in theory a very boring format. It's very flat. As a capture device, you film a white wall with digital sensor and you see nothing. It's just flat. You do it with film and it's alive and it's awake. There's just tuning yourself into seeing that analog response to something. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with digital. I'm just saying that's what it does. But then that's when, as you're saying with a Cooke lens and that roundness, that's what really we've delivered that maybe other lenses don't deliver so well or so organically in the digital field or the digital realm, is because we have an organic roundness to what comes in. And you started off, I know, talking about the Panchro classics and how old they were and going on to that, and is that how we remade them? Well, that whole revolution of bringing an old lens design back to the modern era, we didn't bring it back necessarily. It was brought back by cinematographers because they found digital sterile and they wanted to add something to it. But they wanted, again, like you were saying with your filters, over years you've used them and you're thinking, actually, I want to keep away from that. I enjoyed my experiment when I did it, and it was all part of my learning process. But now the work that I'm doing means I got to work in this fashion. So, but I still want to bring something into it. And that's what brought about that new release of those Panchro classics, is cinematographers going back to old lenses. And that was brought on by DSLRs and adapters and using old lenses and buying them on eBay and putting them about and seeing what does best and getting stuff that new lenses just couldn't deliver because of the analog way they were made, really.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like there's a kind of blanket look that's come over cinematography. Like you mentioned earlier, there's back when I started, there's different film stocks, different processes, and a whole variety of different cameras and lenses and filters back then to choose from. And it's become homogenized now in a way. You have one main or two main camera manufacturers, and then you have you have a digital sensor, so you don't have any film stocks really to choose from. And so that, I think that's why there's such an interest in vintage lenses now, because people want to get, like you say, they want to get that soul back into the image. And my argument is, the lens choice is the most important thing, second to the lighting set. That's really we have to focus on. What's the subject, what you're actually doing, and then the lens. And then the third choice for me is the camera. The lens comes before the camera. If I have to shoot on a camera that I'm not 100% with, but I get to choose a lens, I'd much prefer that scenario than the other way around,
And there's other things in your job, because obviously you had Jason from Love High Speed on the other week. You got to shoot high speed. You're not going to shoot it on a DSLR. Let's face it. You're going to go for a big camera that does it. Or if you want 120 frames or whatever, you need that flexibility in the job you're shooting. You're going to need a camera for that. But if you're just generally producing something, glasses, like saying the first thing after the lighting. And it could be you're producing the lighting or it's being produced by God himself outside. You just want a tool to capture that. And that's what I think lenses are. They are just a very primary tool in your crafting of images.
Yeah, okay. That's great. Carey, should we talk a little bit about the kind of what qualities make up a lens? If you talk about, things like spherical aberration, chromatic aberration, distortion, that sort of thing. Could you just talk the sort of viewer through how you would select a lens and the problems that you can have with a lens, or maybe not the problems, but the characteristics that you encounter with, the design and use of lenses?
Well, I don't design the lenses, but obviously there has been, we're now getting into the full frame age in motion, shall we say. Was it last year or the year before at NAB, which obviously it wasn't this year because we didn't have it. I had a great comment from a young DOP. He came up to the stand and he was talking to me. So I was talking about the new products and the S7s and full frame. And he went, "Oh yeah, but I did that all at film school on 5Ds. I've done full frame. I want to get into Super 35."
That's great. The deep focus thing again. It's like people want to shoot 16mm because they've got a lovely deep focus. And I remember when I started that, everyone wanted to get to 35mm to narrow that depth of field. We wanted to get to the bigger formats for a narrow depth of field. And now there's a kind of movement back to 16mm and to like you say, there'll be a movement back to Super 35 when you have a more kind of, like a deeper focus, and you kind of you're sort of using you're sort of creating a look that's kind of more typical of early cinema as well, and has that nostalgia to it.
Yeah, but there's some other things involved in that, because if you look at full frame, you can't. If you go into a rental house today, a major rental house or a very big or prominent or established rental house, you can go there, and in a Super 35 format, you can go, what lenses do you want? And you'll go boom, 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 and they go boom, 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 zoom. And you've got this range of lenses, or else they can get them for you because they'll sub-hire them in even if they haven't got them, because everybody's got a lot of that sort of kit about there. And you go into full frame and you go, what you got? And they go, we got this, or we got those, but they're out and we don't know if we can get them to sub-hire them in for you. And you're actually reduced in your choice. Now, a lot of those lenses that have come in really have been brought in on the back of full frame stills, because there has been no full frame motion. So your question about lens design and aberrations and chromatic aberration or lens distortion, we had to address that with our S7s, which are our full frame motion picture lenses, because we didn't have a full frame lens of any description. We're not going to take something from here and bring it down and readjust it and put some gears on it and put a PL mount on it and then go whack, stick it on there. There you go. You got a full frame movie lens. It's like, no, we had to start from the bottom. We designed things from the bottom up. And that's a really good case in question for the S7s, for the full frame. We've got to look people like. There's the S4 look, which is a very, very, very sort of renowned look. It's a workhorse stable. There's a couple of lenses in the world that are stables at Super 35 that everybody has and everybody's been brought up on and they've used. And S4 is one of those lenses. And the other's probably the Arri Masters. So they're different, but people know exactly what they are. And then there's everything else, should we say. But when it came to full frame, there wasn't. So we had to design a lens that replicated what we did in Super 35, but it was projecting onto a bigger sensor. And that correlates back to what I was saying about the image area we have, and then the edges where we fall away, which actually in the Panchros, if you look at the Panchro Classics or in the original Speed Panchros, on axis, down the middle, that crosshair there, that sharp, and then they fall away straight away. So they fall away very quickly. That's that classic older vintage look. The S4s, which take their DNA from that lens series, have a bigger area, shall we say, target area where you'll have your projection, you'll have your pair lines sharp, and then you fall away at the edges. But you now have to do that with a bigger sensor. So you have to build a bigger lens. So if you put something like an S7 full frame lens on a Super 35 image, here and here, if I'm right on the screen, you'll be really sharp towards the edges because the projection of the lens is producing a bigger, sharper image because it's designed for a different surface area to cover.
Yeah.
So we had to replicate as close as possible because, again, they're not the same glass. We're using different elements for different glasses, for different projection, for different ray traces, and also manufacturing that lens series, because we were the first to bring out a design from the ground up, full frame 3x2 36x24 motion picture lens. We designed it in a PL mount because, you know what, the PL mount was the only mount available for full frame then. And then people decide to come along with bigger mounts, because if you have a bigger circle, it's easier to make a ray trace to go onto a bigger sensor. So the design that went into that and all the calculations, though obviously computers are used today, not slide rules like they used to back in the day when we were making lenses on those old polishing machines. To desensitize a very sensitive lens and build it again with new glass is really what we did there. And the beauty of that is really the feedback we've had from cinematographers to say, I love shooting S4s, and now I've gone to full frame. I love that field. I understand, that they may be getting into a little bit more or less curvature with rectilinear, so they like that over the bigger formats. There's slight little difference there, but still on the surface area of the sensor, they get their sharp image, they get their fall off, they get that Cooke look, they get that dimensionality. So that was a challenge, but we brought them out, and they do as they're meant to do. But in that design, we've stuck to the principles and of the Cooke look. So, yeah, that was a challenge. People say, oh, why haven't you built them smaller, or why haven't you done this, or why haven't you done that? Well, at the time, we were sort of flying a bit in the dark because we didn't know what the cameras were going to be when they came out. We just knew they were coming.
Someone actually told me something today that I wanted to ask you. They said that with Cooke lenses, they're designed to actually be faster than how they're set on a lens. So you basically over design the lens. So so like an S4, for example, goes to T2. I was told that you stop them at T2 because that's where the quality that you're looking for, resolution and the Cooke look.
We design. Yeah, in that respect, when a Cooke lens has a T-stop put on it, you could design it a bit bigger. You could let a little bit like fall through, but the quality of T2 is the same quality you're going to get at T22. There is no difference in the quality. So you take something like the old super speeds from Zeiss. Yeah, I mean, you open them up, they'll just fall apart. Some people like that falling apart image. So optimum, you want to use them, put them at 2.8, and you get a great image. Well, we don't have that. The T-stop, the fastest T-stop the lens is, it's at its optimum. It has an optimum resolution as the same as it would stop completely down.
Very interesting. Yeah, a lot of the vintage lenses like the K35s or the old Leicas, you shoot them wide open, you're dealing with one set of lenses, you stop them down to 2.8, and it's a completely different lens. You've changed to another set of lenses. They look completely different.
I've even seen that in a modern range of lenses that someone brought out that was meant to be how shall we say, vintage when wide open, and it's got a different characteristic wide open than when you stop it down. And that's fine for old lenses. I think it's a bit unfair on new lenses because people go, that's not what I was looking at. What? But anyway, that's their choice. They want to do that. But yeah, I mean, vintages and that look is all sort of pretty vogue, isn't it? So we shall see how much of that sticks around, and will there be another vogue and another fashion? But like you've bought your minis, at 2.8. The thing is, when you're a commercial cinematographer and you're producing content and product for somebody who's paying for you to do that, and you can go, do you like it? And they go, wow, yeah. You're onto a good thing. I mean, it's great to put the super speeds and the things if they really want that look. But there's a comfort in going, now I can really hone this image for them because I know that they're happy with it because it resonates with them.
Yeah, I mean, over time you refine your tools as a cinematographer. I think it takes a good 10 years just to get into the fundamentals of lighting. And once you kind of know what you're doing with your set or with your subject, then you can refine down the tools with your, over the time. When I first started shooting, I was lucky enough to have directors that were supported by Panavision, so I got to go through all of the old Panavision shelves and use every form of anamorphic and spherical lens that was available. And I you've got to get all of that out of your system as a DOP. You've got to kind of try everything out and work out what works for you. And as you get on, you go through a process of elimination, and things get simpler. And you focus more on as I say, you focus more on the lighting and on the storytelling, and the relationship with the director, and things that are kind of fundamentally more important to get good products. I've got a technical question for you. With spherical aberration. So my understanding of that is that you have your film plane or your sensor, and then the lens is focusing its light rays to a point of sharpness. And if it falls short or goes beyond, then you get a soft image, and that's spherical aberration. Is that right?
Yeah.
About that.
I believe so.
So one of my questions is, like lenses like the K35s, when people say that they got a kind of ghosting that happens when you open them up fully. It feels to me like there's because the eyes still look sharp, but there's a ghosting around it as well. So it feels to me like there's a sharp image with a soft image overlaid on the top of it. So it has a kind of like the eyes still look sharp, but it's got this kind of blooming of the skin at the same time. And I put that down as to perhaps spherical aberration. And I was just wondering whether you would agree with that, whether that's just.
Well, I'm not a lens designer, and I'm not a cinematographer. So, I mean, it could be lens aberration. I don't know if it's field curvature in the ray trace of the lens, as opposed to going onto a flat surface. There's a curvature in how the ray traces where they would focus. And I'm not a lens technician, so I know what you're talking about because I know what it looks like, but I don't have the inside knowledge necessarily to say that's that, and that's that.
Because the reason I asked that is to do with Cooke lenses again, because as you mentioned earlier, Cooke have a reputation for having a softer, more human look, a gentler look, more organic look, say. However, when you put them on a projector, you realize that they're actually just as resolved as your most modern lens. And that really surprised me, because it does, they do have a kind of real softness to them, but they're sharp at the same time. The eyes are still sharp, right? You're still seeing
which
sharp
is why I say, which is why I said we don't have cameras at the factory to tell. Everyone's always amazed, what do you mean? What they look like on these cameras? I don't know. We don't put them on cameras. What do you mean? Well, a camera has so many anomalies and differences in them that they present a whole load of other problems. If you're designing a lens, you want to see light passing through that lens and how it projects. Obviously, we put it on a projector. We have a graticule, which is a chart, which is the reverse chart or similar reverse charts to what you have when you go into a rental house and you have charts on the wall and you put your camera on your lens and you try and see how sharp something is and the fall off around. We for making lenses, you shine it back through because you see the true projection of the sharpness of that lens through it. Having said that, I have to say I've forgotten where I was going with that point. But that's soft sharpness. So that's where you see the sharpness of the lens. The softness is introduced by what the lens does by taking light, and that's because of everybody knows, all the lens designers worldwide, they know what glass is available. Yeah, so there's no magic in the glass that we choose. Okay, it's available to everybody because Zeiss, Leica, Tokina, Sigma, Cooke, Argenau, whoever, whatever, whenever, they don't make the glass. We don't smelt glass. We don't have a factory shoveling in coal and smelting glass and melting it down. We buy glass. Everybody buys glass in from the manufacturers, and those manufacturers, the two major ones in the business are Schott, German, and Ohara, which is Japanese, and then there's a load of other smaller glass manufacturers, and there's certain things in the makeup of the glass that our designers are looking for to produce the look at the back end that the design gives them. So that's what it's sort of about. Refractive index, some of the elements that may be in the glass that will highlight or reduce or enhance a wavelength into the design you want at the back end. So if people wanted to, I presume, they could retro design a Cooke lens, but they wouldn't find it easy because they wouldn't have the branding, they wouldn't have the back. I mean, this is another thing. This is what sort of concerns me going forward. Is the reason that the rental houses buy established brands is that they know they can get them serviced, they can get them warranted, they can get them looked after, they can get everything. Now, you buy a lens on eBay, absolutely great. It will give you an amazing look. And don't worry, I bought enough myself and put them on adapters and had great fun with them. If they're going to fall apart, who have you got to look after them? So the major manufacturers do have a responsibility to produce well-designed, well-manufactured goods that also are innovative of the period and deliver a vogue. But remember, we are not producing lenses anywhere on the scale of what Mercedes-Benz is designing a car. Do you know what I mean? There's not a scale of manufacture. So when people say, oh, motion picture lenses, they're really expensive compared to, I can buy this Fuji photo lens or this, the scale in which they're built, the precision under which they're built is uncomparable to what motion picture lenses are built to. So that's just a little bit of education back to the viewing public. I mean, for example, your lens, the Minis, fantastic lens. There are in price range, there are entry level, which some people would balk even at the price of our entry level lens. But every marking on that focus on your lens is individually marked to where the focus mark is for the group of optics that are hand built into that lens where they fit. So it's not, is that 4 foot on that lens, either side of the marking. On the marking, bang, it's 4 foot. But if that is that 40 mil, 40.005 mil, or is it a 39.0999 mil? Those little deviations, you with the glass, you can't change. You build the lens to cover what is the remit, but the marking of the focus is exact. So that craftsmanship and that build is what keeps our lenses sort of at the pricing that they sort of are, and we're a very small company, so we have a big name. It's just not available to everybody because we build at a speed that makes sure some of that quality is kept in it, and so do the other motion picture lens manufacturers. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's a small market compared to the stills market.
So to compare stills lenses to cinema lenses, there's two things that I would like to throw into the conversation as well. Firstly, breathing, because obviously stills lenses aren't designed to shoot motion pictures, so therefore the breathing isn't an issue. And secondly, the actual design of your lenses is it's a thread bearing design.
No, we don't use a thread bearing design. We use a cam follower.
Cam design, not a thread bearing design. Yeah, thank you. So could you explain a little bit about the difference between that and also the breathing situation as well?
Well, I mean, I remember years ago, there also used to be a lot of breathing in video lenses as well, not just stills lenses. There were some problems with zooms and that, which they sort of knocked a lot out of because they're for ENG compared to motion picture zoom lenses, shall we say. So they had those sorts of issues. Breathing is really when you're getting movement on the edge of frame. Funny you say that, though, because anamorphics have breathing, and that becomes part of the quality that people like. So it's a little bit difficult to say, oh, that lens has got breathing. Oh, that lens doesn't, but so that lens is better. It's not. But generally, you would say that the pitch or the focus pitch with inside a stills lens is not designed mechanically to facilitate the focus movement through, so that the edges of the frame movement is, because it's costly to design it out, is costed into the design of building a stills lens. It's not relevant. It's for still. So that's one thing, and it can become quite annoying and distracting when you've got movement going on the edge of lenses when you're pulling focus and they're not designed for it. So that's an extra cost. It's a lot of design time. It's also a lot of precision. I had a comment, something on the news the other day where it was somebody, I think it was the MD of Bentley or something, and he said, yes, and we're designing to a millimetre. It's like, a millimetre? We're designing to microns. Okay, and microns are thousandths of an inch. This is a true story we had from a bearing supplier many years ago, I've been told, before my time. And after they sent the bearings into us and we tested them, we went back to them and said, nah, they're not good enough. And they said, well, these are the most expensive bearings in the world, and they're used on all of whatever machines and cars and whatever, and no one's had any problem. You know, the noise off them is blah, blah, 0, 0, 0. And he said, yeah, so they're used on machines going to how many revs per thousand? Oh, going around 1,000 revs per minute. So yeah, we go 270 degrees and maybe we go 10 miles an hour. So that's how smooth we want it, because we're only doing that. And I get people come up to us at trade shows and they're literally, got one here, put one up here, got a full frame anamorphic here, and they'll pull that lens. I don't know where the mic is on this, but it's just frictionless. It's like air. And that smoothness comes from an attention to detail that we have to give to a motion picture lens, because that's what they do. Because when you project them up there, if you have that breathing, if I have it on my computer screen, okay, it's negligible. If I have it on my iPhone, it's even less negligible. So, yeah, look, it looks great. You put it up there on 40 foot wide and it's going like that, edge of frame. Yeah. It's not pretty. It's not happy. And so that's what we design for. We design for our lenses to shoot something that's going to go up. So my head here is going to be 10, 12 foot tall on a screen. It's a completely different medium.
And just to clarify for the listeners, the difference between hams and thread bearings.
Right. So thread bearing helicoids are threads. Yeah. Very simple for pulling the lenses backwards and forwards through the focus. We used to use helicoid, the original Cooke S2, S3s, Speed Pancros. They were helicoid. But it was when we introduced the S4s. Now, the story of the S4s was sort of an interesting story historically in the business. It's where basically Panavision had brought out their primo lenses, and they're spherical they were, and they were cleaning up in Hollywood. And some of the big Hollywood rental houses wanted to have be able to get work and have competition to Panavision, because they'd done really well with these lenses. And they came to Cooke, and just so happened that Cooke were designing the S4s. And one of the remits on the S4 was for it to be easy to service. There's a great video. We do have it up. It might be on our Vimeo, but definitely searchable on our Facebook, where there's a TV program from Canada called How Things Work. They do lawnmowers, tractors, whatever. Right, and they, I was looking for it earlier for you, Jake, to put up, so we could play it out. I couldn't find it in time. But we sent them the CAD drawings, and they do this wonderful exploded drawing and explain everything and how the whole lens is built. And you see the cam. And the cam's really simple. It's like an inverse monorail. So we have a polypropylene stud that sits on a pin, and that sits on the optic body. So it's a monobody, the optic is inside, and to move the body backwards and forwards, it has an outer casing, and inverse in that casing is this reversed monoline, as to say, a groove. And the way that you cut the groove out depends on how the focus moves, either more quickly or more slowly at the end of a focus. So if I pull something up here like this lens, and you'll see maybe down here, we're down at all of the close focus marks, or am I down at infinity? Where am I? Yeah, I'm down at 2'8". Okay, so as I pull through here, my next mark there is what, 2'9" or 3 foot? And then I'll go to here, and then I'll go to here, and I probably won't get to here. Like 5 foot yet? No, I'm at 4'3", but I've already gone through from here a good just under 90 degrees, maybe 70 degrees of a turn of an arc. And the whole turn of the arc all the way through is 270 degrees. But as you look at the back end here, the markings between infinity to 60 foot to 30 foot, because when you're pulling focus so far away, it's not as critical as when you're pulling focus close up. So part of the design of the S4s through the cam follower system was taking into account what focus pullers needed. They need that precision when they're up close. And that's why, focus pullers say, give me another stop, governor, because they need another stop to bring in the focus between here and there. But having the cam follower allowed, if we wanted to, we could reverse the cam follower, and you could have 31 foot, 32 foot, 33 foot, and between, 4 foot and 6 foot, you could have a tiny little gap. So that's what the cam follower does. So this outer of the lens, inside there's the optical body or the slug, and the mechanics here, and these, along with the mounts, we're working within microns for that precision in those lenses. And that's where, a lot of the cost goes into the design, there's two parts to the lens. There's the optic and there's the mechanic. So that's really where the marriage of those two parts come together to help the shooting of the movie for the focus puller to get his job of moving that motion of the lens to precision to where it needs to be. And the cam follower is a very simple system to service, especially in the S4s. It's a very simple service, and that's why they became very, service technicians love S4s, because they can take a set of 10 lenses in and out in the day, service them, and they're back, come in the morning, they're back out in the afternoon to go out on another job. So, that's helpful when you're trying to pay them off, as to say, through the lease.
Yeah, very interesting. And of course, another difference between stills lenses and the motion picture lenses is, like you said, the expanded focus as well for the focus puller. Yeah.
On that, also the other point is the lens, if it moves forward physically and you've got a matte box on it, if the matte box is on rails, you're going to whack into the filter that's a piece of glass unless you've got it on. But then sometimes you're going to have a bellows in the matte box to move with a lens that does that. And does it move further than there you want it to go, or you're restricted to where you can go? And then if you stick the matte box on the front of the lens and you twist it, the matte box twists with the focus and goes 90 degrees, and now you've got, vignetting on the edge of frame. So there's a lot of engineering consideration that goes into designing a lens so it's fit for purpose. Some people think that's, you take it to there, but at Cooke we take it to there and beyond, because those are our customers. That's what they expect.
Great. Well, thank you, Carey. That's very, very clear. So, Jake, do we have any questions that we should be answering at this stage?
Yeah, there's a couple. Cal asks, there's a question for Carey. When coming up with new products, how much of the mentality is coming up with something potentially new and unique, and how much is about iterative technical improvement? And are there any new and exciting technical improvements on the horizon that may shake up the game?
Good question. So new and innovative, that has to be put into context. So if you are designing a new lens that fits a series, for example, we remanufactured the Cooke S2, S3 Speed Panchros in a modern design, and everyone said they're not going to look the same. We didn't redesign them. We took the original designs, we looked at the original glass, we matched modern glass to the old glass. What we did modern is we gave them modern mechanics. We gave them the cam follower system. We gave them the engraving system. We gave them eye technology. And eye technology, I'll go on to in a minute. What it then allowed us to do is, once we'd got the original set, 18 through to 152 millimeter, it then allowed us to bring in some new lenses for that series. So we brought in a 65mm macro. The 65mm, since the throw's bigger, we realized it covered full frame. So we then brought it out. We said, and this macro covers full frame if you want it. The lens never existed in that lens series before, but we didn't go away from the principle of the lens series of the Panchro Classics, which is on axis sharp, and then we have a fall away. And to reiterate ways in which we know we got that lens series right, I had a wonderful complaint that I just thought, yeah, perfect. That's not a complaint, that's a compliment. The focus puller just didn't know it. So I got a call from a customer in Spain, and he said, we got the new Panchros and they've gone on to a job, but the focus puller's complaining because he can't hold focus to the edge of frame. I went, oh, that's not good. I said, you mean it's sharper on one side of the frame than the other? Like, you know, the optics moved a bit. And we're like, no, they can't hold focus on the edge to the actress in the middle. I said, that's what they're meant to do. And they said, yeah, but the focus puller said they're new lenses. I said, yeah, they are new lenses. They're built new to an old design where the optic means it falls away evenly to the edge. So if he can't hold her on this side and he can't hold the actor on that side, but in the middle he's pin sharp, which is where he's got focus, the problem is, and they're like, oh, so that's just because the focus puller wasn't aware that a vintage lens, because it was modern, he thought it would be sharp to the edge of frame. No, it's not. We kept to the design. We kept to the integrity of the look. So the question about new and innovative, remember, for people like ourselves manufacturing lenses, you can't design one lens that does one thing to go off at a tangent. It has to fit into a series of lenses that people use because they're not still images. You're going to be using lenses that have to have continuity across the focal lengths so that the cinematographer can tell the story faithfully with inside that lens series for the look he's trying to keep to. Now, that's not to say that today many cinematographers on an episodical or a feature or something between times in scenes or different periods in films use different lens series to get a look and effect. They do, or for one character, but they still have the series because they don't know if they're going to go 21, 25 or 27, should we say, lens in focal length based upon the location they're in. So but moving that on, we've just introduced, and we announced at NAB, though we weren't there because it was closed, we've just introduced and announced, not introduced yet, announced a new series of macro lenses for S7 full frame. So we've announced a 60, a 90 and 150mm macro. We're not known for macros necessarily. Been asked several times why that was, and I was explained that when macros were in vogue, we were designing and building something else, and when we got around to design and build them, they'd suddenly gone out of favor and they weren't required. But obviously full frame is a new series because it's a new sensor size, so therefore the macros are relevant to the S7 lens series. And we've had a lot of positive feedback from, for example, the 65mm anamorphic macro. Anamorphics, regardless of manufacturer, everybody knows generally anamorphics have their close focus is quite far away. So therefore, people like to get in close on pack shots and so forth. So there's not many close focus ones. We brought out a 65mm that gives you a horizontal of 32mm, close to a 35mm, field of view of what we consider to be for human field of view. And so everybody loves it because you can get a vista on it and you can get a tight on it and you can get close on it. It's a really versatile. So we brought the 65mm out in the Panchro Classic macro to deal with it. We've just brought an 85mm out in the full frame anamorphics because it was the same sort of general focal length in full frame as the 65 was in Super 35 4.3 anamorphic. So designing something that's innovative has to fit the remit of the lens series that it is dropping into. Maybe. And I love lens, maybe. I think they're crazy, but we're not going to go off in that sort of tangent. And the other thing that's really interesting, once we can get everybody all on board, is really eye data, because the I3 series, which means that every spherical lens leaving the factory, data that comes out of that lens, once we can get the camera manufacturers to ingest it properly, but we don't make cameras, will mean that all of the distortion mapping and aberration and anything that is seen in a lens is recorded for VFX, and you can therefore snap in and out of your plates with a lens that you would possibly think previously may not be as rectilinear as what you wanted. So you'd shoot plates in a more flatter way, should we say. You can start shooting with lenses that add more character in there, be they the forward and or the plate, because that data is coming through. There'll be, in theory, there should be no reason to shoot grid tests in the future. However, that data has to be rock solid. So you reshim a lens by a few microns, that data has shifted. That's the difficult part. But for high-end productions, yeah, that's we're working on that with some very big companies, and that could really change the game in regards to how VFX lenses, which lenses you'd use for VFX is going to come along, because we are down to pixel for pixel matching with the data that comes out of the lenses for CGI and VFX.
So that's like a lens coming out of the manufacturer that has a like a fingerprint, and that fingerprint's matched to the data that can be traced back at any point to
yeah. But that lens, that serial number, it's unique. So it's a unique birth stamp fingerprint for everything in there. And the aspiration of that, and it may come this year, hopefully it will come this year, is that distortion mapping and lens data will be in our anamorphics.
Right. Okay.
I think I was explained was something like, is it 3,000 or 10,000 more coefficients per lens have to be ingested?
Okay.
Because anamorphics are like, whoa.
Before we take another question, though, one thing that I was going to try and get you to talk a little bit more about is the anamorphic lenses. You've sort of touched on them a few times during the conversation. Is there anything you want to sort of explain a little bit about the series? Because there's two series of anamorphic lenses at the moment. Am I right?
Yeah, we have the standard Super 35s. Again, the question is interesting, because if it was asked many years ago, when we brought out the anamorphics in 2014, one of the problems DP said, or people said when they listened, they don't flare. Right. Okay. So, but anamorphics flare. Oh, I love the flare that anamorphics give. You get all of that. And it's like, well, we designed them to have anamorphic character. Flare is one of those characters, but it's one of the characters. Barreling distortion, pinhole distortion, ramp, that sort of breathing and ramping, oval bokeh. There's lots of other characteristics you want, and not everything has to be of flare. Flare doesn't make everything. I'm sure when you started, Ian, you were told, move that flag over there, it's flaring, put the French arm down there. Everyone was trying to get rid of flares. Now it's all a vogue.
My focus pulling career came to an early end because of a flare. So
you'd be sitting in the rushes in the morning thinking, I haven't got flare on the lens. And if you had, you might be out pretty soon. So yeah, it's an interesting vogue what flare has become, shall we say. So we didn't design them with that. We designed them with the principles of anamorphic, which is we design our anamorphics so the anamorphic cylinder is either in the middle or at the front. And we call that true anamorphic, real anamorphics, because anamorphics, when they were originally designed, were spherical lenses that had anamorphic cylinders put on them. And if 1890...
The rear optic of the anamorphic.
No, in front of it.
Oh, in front of it, right. Okay.
Yeah. Rear anamorphics is later.
Sorry, say that again, Carey?
Rear anamorphics is later.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry, carry on.
So the first one is Technorama with Spartacus, I think, and they put a Delarama anamorphic on front of a Cooke, because 90% of lenses or 80% of lenses in the US at that time were Cooke lenses. So all you were doing was bolting on this anamorphic element onto the front. And they were designed because television was coming in, theatres were supposedly emptying, so the studios, because it was still the studio system there, thought that television was going to take all of its paying public away, so they wanted to introduce something new. That's what 3D was about, something new. Technorama, Cinescope, all of these things were new inventions at the cinema to bring people back to the paying public, so the studios could make money. That's not to say that widescreen hadn't been done before. I think there's like a 1920-21 black and white Napoleon film where it's 3 cameras all lined up and they're sort of projected seamlessly and you get a really big view. So widescreen had been tried before, but not off one negative. So the original anamorphics are to work with a 35mm film, full perf, to take the 4:3 image, take the height, squeeze it in, and then when you projected it, which is why there's a lot of those obvious homemade anamorphics out there, they're the projection lenses that you put on the front of a spherical lens, which people have been doing on DSLRs to get an anamorphic look, because on film, the film was captured, squeezed, and then when you projected it, you had to unsqueeze it. So there were 2 types of anamorphic lenses. Today, digital, you just flick a switch. So if you look at one of the lenses, this is a full frame, basically the spherical elements are in here, and the anamorphic, which you can sort of see looking down there, maybe a sort of a boxy sort of lens in there, that's where the anamorphic cylinder is to squeeze the image. They're there for Super 35, and we just introduced the first from the ground, again, built up full frame anamorphic, because a 3x2 sensor doesn't exist in motion picture. We got IMAX, we got 65mm, we got 70mm, but we don't have full frame. We don't have 36-24 pixels. So we designed a 1.8 anamorphic, and everybody was like, well, why aren't you using your 2 times anamorphic like you use in your Super 35? The reason we chose to go 180 was 1.8 is if you take a 1.8 D-squeeze, you will use 90% of the sensor. So if a 3x2 full frame sensor is 6K, you'll be using 5.7K. That falls within everybody's remit for broadcasting of this 4K remit, should we say. What it actually produces... Go on.
Sorry, is the aspect ratio still 240:1 or something?
No, it's not. The native, that's what I was just going to say. The native aspect of that lens is 270.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that's like Ultra Panavision's 276. I mean, you're wide, you're mega wide. So but to get it onto the sensor, your 270 native, that's 5.7K. You crop into 240, you're well within 5 something K, but you're well within the requirements of the streamers, shall we say. Mm-hmm. But 1.8 means that it's not a linear curve. If you take 2 times anamorphic, say here, as being the most anamorphic look, with that stretch and bokeh and that feel you get, and you go down to 1.3 down here, it's not a lovely linear curve of, as you go down the D squeeze, it looks just a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less anamorphic. It goes from going anamorphic to not looking anamorphic. So at those lower ratios, you don't get those characteristics. You have to be at the high end, and 1.8 is at the high end. So the teardrop bokeh that you get off the lenses is teardrop like you would get off a 2 times anamorphic. The feel and the curvature of the edge of frame is very, very, very similar to the 2 times. It's not like a 1.6, and it's definitely not like a 1.3. And some of those lenses were designed earlier for different formats. They just cover the full frame sensor, shall we say. So people have restored back to them, or you go to 1.5 and it covers all of the sensor. Well, yeah, it covers all of the sensor, but it doesn't have any of the look. So, we don't think it was relevant. So our anamorphic principle has always been to design in as much anamorphic look as possible, to be as funky anamorphic as possible. And now Yes, we didn't introduce that streak effect in 2014 when we brought it out, but now we have recoated the lenses and we have another version. It's not a retrofit, but you can buy it with that streaking effect if that's what you want. So they're called special flares, and they're available in both 2x for Super 35 or full frame. So, you know, we have 2 series and 4 choice.
And what colour are the flares on the special flare series?
So that sort of blue, you know, Panavision type bluey flare look that is, you know, it's a classical, what people now consider to be the classical sort of blue flare effect. It's not a streak. There's a difference between flaring in a lens and a streak. I mean, I used to, you know, design flare streak filters when I had my filter company. You know, they're lines going across because they're just hitting elements. Those sorts of anamorphic flares are when the light is bouncing around off the different elements, and the element may be an anamorphic element with a stretch, it may be a spherical element, but they change in shape. They're not uniform, shall we say, and as you pan across the light, you'll see that all change, and that's, you know, that's lovely characteristic if that adds to what you're shooting, of course. So yeah, we've designed those, and they're very new. They've only been out, a few went out turn of the year, and then we stopped, obviously, because of COVID, and we're slowly starting back up to get product out there for people. We shall see who's buying what when everyone comes back.
I've got so many more questions to ask you, Carey, but I am aware that Jake, how long more have we got?
3 minutes.
Whoa!
So we can't even take any more questions. So the questions I was going to ask you actually was that I think if we only do have 3 minutes, it's probably good to end in the anamorphic. So therefore, could you put the anamorphic in the context of your history? Because I would imagine other lens manufacturers use Cooke optics and anamorphisize them. You were relatively late.
There's the Extel Express by Joe Dunton, which now Panavision own. I think Harry in London have got set, and a few other people have got sets. People like those. He did 2 versions. He did the Cooke Speed Pancro version, and he did the Zeiss Super Speed version of that. So Joe Dunton did those back in the 80s in the UK. There was stuff in the US. I think Todd A.O. And the Delrama one I was talking about for Spartacus. Many anamorphized Cooke lenses that we didn't even know about. So yeah, we weren't involved because we'd made the original slug, the original spherical optic. People were bits on, but building our own one, and now we actually even have our own zooms. So we have our own anamorphic zooms where the cylinder is at the front, because if you put the cylinder at the front, you get the characteristic. If you put the cylinder at the back and you stop down, the bokeh goes from oval to spherical. So, you know, you stop down to 4 to get the depth of field that you need to pull the focus, and suddenly the characteristic of your look's gone out the window because it doesn't look the same as it was at 2.8, or do you go 5.6 to 4 or something. So that's why we build front anamorphics. They're more characterful. Right.
Carey, there's so much more I'd like to discuss with you. I'd love for you to be able to come back maybe when you have time, because there's so many more questions I have for you. We didn't even get into filters. There's a way more. I would like to talk to you about the history of cinema and how optics has affected that. There's a huge amount, but it's just been amazing listening to you. I don't know if you guys have enjoyed it as much as me, but I've learned so much.
Sorry we didn't get to answer the questions.
Let's do it rapid fire. Short, sweet answers to the questions, all right? So, Chris Hallam is asking, what would you say the best set of Cookes would be to buy, like, for someone who's doing, so what was it he said he was doing? He's doing entertainment shoots, documentaries, shorts, music videos. That
Mini S4s.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, look at All or Nothing on Amazon about Manchester City. All of the directors and the player interviews are all shot Mini S4s. They look like movie stars. Doesn't look documentary.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's good looking documentary. Cam Bob 3000 asks, are any Cooke lens designs apochromatic? Are there any downsides to going for an APO design?
That's out of my remit.
Okay. Ali Hutchinson asks, mini anamorphics, a possibility?
Not right now.
Yeah, it would be awesome though. And this is one for Ian.
Yeah.
How would you say Cookes differ from other lenses you've used, i.e. Zeiss, Leica?
Sorry, what's the question again? What?
How would you say Cookes differ from other lenses you've used, i.e. Zeiss and Leica?
Well, the major difference is the dimensionality we were talking about earlier, and that is a combination of that kind of soulful skin tone, three-dimensionality, and that kind of, like Carey was saying, not kind of being focused on trying to get like a technical perfect lens, but going for what the human experience should be. So that's kind of my experience of it. I totally agree with what Carey was saying earlier.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, just very quickly, recently, watch some news presenters on the BBC. When it goes soft behind them, it looks mushy and horrible. I know why they're doing it. They're using 35mm sensors and they're trying to put a look in. But it irks me. It doesn't feel right. You look at something at Cooke and you're like, it just feels natural.
Yeah, I think we're going to move away from this narrow depth of field, everything like soft background kind of look. I think people are going to want to get back into like having more variety. It's great to have different looks, but to have something homogenized is when everyone's copying everyone else, just dialing in a look without really too much thought or craft going into it. I think that's something that I feel strongly about.
It's just different tools for different jobs, and that's really what it comes down to. And
because some of them, nothing wrong with other manufacturers. They work brilliantly for other jobs and other things. If that's what you want, that's fine.
And this is the thing as well. Every time I speak to a customer about buying a set of lenses, the most important thing, I think you mentioned it earlier, Ian, is testing the lenses and making sure they fit what you want. Because it's like asking a random painter what their favorite paintbrush is, and it's like, well, it completely depends how what you're painting, how you're painting it. It's such a personal preference to how you create imagery. So that's why we have, we have, like Carey's mentioned, we have lens projectors, we have collimators, we have, one of the best lens engineers in the country. And we have pretty much every lens you could want to get your hands on, we can get our hands on. And if you want to come down once COVID's all blown over and actually properly test them, we have the facility to do that, which is actually one thing I think me and Ian have got planned once this gets blown over.
Everybody's eye is different. So, you are, if you're the cinematographer, it's your eye. It's what works for you. It's everybody, you're quite right. I use that painting analogy all the time. Oil, watercolor, or acrylic. Do you like Jackson Pollock, Velasquez, or Vermeer? I mean...
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's very true. And there's also something, there's an alchemy about lenses as well. There's a magic. We've lost the alchemy of film. But we haven't lost the alchemy of lens optics.
Yeah,
that's what